over. So yeah, so without further ado, I don't want to take up any more of their time, but I introduced you Vanessa Dominguez. She's the Director of Teaching and Learning for South San. And with her is Michelle Esquivel, who's the Social Studies Specialist. And I'll let them give a further introduction of themselves, and then they can get right into it. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Vanessa Dominguez, and as Michelle stated, I am the Director of Teaching and Learning. And this is my first year in the position. I've actually only been in the position for about 6 months. Prior to this, I was an elementary principal, which you'll hear more about the MTSS RTI process. And previously before that, I've been an elementary, a middle school, and a high school assistant principal, an instructional coach, K through 5, all contents, a literacy coach, grades 3 through 5, and I taught grades kinder, first, second, third, and was also a dyslexia teacher. And so all of those roles together really helped our MTSS RTI implementation at the elementary campus I was at be successful. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Michelle Esquivel.
We can't hear you, Michelle. Are you muted?
Okay, I'll introduce her for you. So this is Michelle Esquivel. This is her first year in this position as a social studies specialist. Previous to that, she was a special ed inclusion resource teacher at the elementary. And she's also been an elementary teacher teaching, and she's taught multiple grades, all contents. So today we're going to talk about, the session is titled Implementing MTSS RTI Without Tears. So the outcomes of today's session are, we're going to talk about year one and what did year one look like at the elementary campus I was at. The next thing we're going to go and do is year two. How did we enhance what we did year one and year two to ensure that we were raising student success? And then the third thing we're going to talk about are what are some of the lessons learned as we implemented the MTSS RTI system in our campus. So this is how I felt day one when I started as a campus principal. It was July 6th. And so I, was really excited to be a first year principal. And I called my chief academic officer and I asked her, where could I find the RTI schedule or any documents on RTI that are in the protocols that our district follows when it comes to MTSS RTI. So she sends me over a document, and it turns out that at the elementary level, they were only doing MTSS RTI 3 times a week for 30 minutes for all subjects. Then I proceeded to ask what curriculum or what research-based intervention program did we use as a district? And I was told that we did not have a research-based intervention any subject. So that day, I knew that there was going to be some work that I was going to need to do and that I was going to have to build the MTSS RTI system and protocols and procedures in our campus. So I was a little bit nerve-wracked, but it was also exciting that I would get to build the program at the elementary level. So I started and I created a priority list. And priority number 1 was to find a research-based intervention program that was teacher direct instruction for both reading and math. And I needed something that was systematic, that the teachers could follow a script, because I knew that since they hadn't been doing intervention, the teachers were going to need a lot of guidance. And so I needed it to be something that was simple, something that followed a pattern, and something that they'd be successful at, because I knew that if I implemented more than one teacher direct instruction intervention program for reading and math at a time, that there was going to be a learning gap for the teachers. And I just needed them to do intervention every single day, intervention instruction every single day. And then we use progress learning for independent intervention that the students would do in small group. I also knew that I didn't want the teachers to focus on creating stations while they were doing intervention, direct instruction for intervention, because I wanted them to focus on that direct instruction. And so that's why I knew we needed some type of computer program that the students could do while they were not with their teacher. I also knew that I needed to secure funding. When I came into this position, the budget had was already created, as it is in most districts, where the prior principal creates the budget the year before with the chief financial officer. So the budget was already created, and the previous principal had not put enough funding for me to purchase the programs that I needed. And in this case, it was LLI for reading and iReady for math. So when I purchased LLI, at that time, it was $48,000, and I purchased enough kits for K through 5. And then iReady instruction wasn't that expensive. It actually was only about $10,000. And then Progress Learning, the campus that I was at was a unique campus. It had actually 2 schools in one, with 2 separate campus numbers. So I had a Global Leadership Academy that was only grades 2nd through 4th, and then I had the Comprehensive Elementary that was K through 5. And so through the Global Leadership Academy, the district actually had purchased Progress Learning for them. And so since we were at the campus, all of our students got access to that. So after begging my chief financial officer about 3 separate times for funding, she called me maybe, I think it was August 15th, and she said, I have enough money, but the purchase needs to come in by August 30th. Can you order the materials, and can you get it to me by that deadline? And I told her yes. I didn't even know, I hadn't even talked to a rep, but I just knew that I had to get this material because we had just come out of COVID. And so I knew that there was going to be a large learning loss, and there was going to be a large gap that our students were going to have. And I needed to have something that was research-based, that I could train the teachers, and that I knew I had seen success with before. So at my previous district, we used LLI. Actually, only the reading interventionist used LLI. And in one first grade classroom, or one grade level in first grade, she had about 30 students. And out of all those students, 17 of them had moved 5 reading levels within 1 year of working with her. And this is that she didn't see them every day. So I knew that this program had success, and I knew that it would be easy to implement. The teachers would be able to follow it. Like I said, it was scripted. And so I ordered the materials, and they came by the deadline. So the next priority goal was, okay, now I have the programs. Now, what does our master schedule look like? So prior to myself being the principal at that elementary, the teachers had always created their own schedule. The only thing that they received was, this is your lunch time, and this is your, we call it specials, but like PE, music, art schedule. This is when you have to go to those, and everything else is up to you to decide when you're going to do it. So I created a master schedule around the MTSS RTI schedule, which means that I didn't start with lunch first or PE. That was actually the very last thing, like where it would fit in. That's where I fit it in. I wasn't worried about lunch duty. I said I'd figure it out. We have to prioritize what is our most important thing, and that was the master schedule, and that was instruction. So our master schedule always revolved around instruction. I also told the teachers that this was a non-negotiable. I did meet with some teachers at the beginning, and they were kind of like, well, we've always made our own schedule. This schedule, it's a lot, it's confusing. And it was just, they just needed to get used to the format and to the instructional minutes that we were going to adhere to. So that's also a thing that we did not have district-wide was instructional minutes, a framework for instructional minutes. We also, all special programs were scheduled around the MTSS RTI schedule, which means when we had our reading intervention, our reading RTI time, that's when dyslexia students would get pulled. That's where we would pull our students for a resource, because the rule was no one got pulled out of Tier 1 instruction. And so at the beginning, that was, it was a work in progress. You know, I had to remind the teachers, like, we are sticking to the schedule. We need to make sure that we are aligned and that everyone is adhering to this. So this is a sample of what our master RTI, or master our master schedule at our campus looked like. So what you're going to see is one of the other things I implemented was partner pair. So for example, you see 4th grade language arts and reading and 4th grade math. And so their RTI time was in, anyone's RTI time on the master schedule was in yellow. Their specials were in that lighter purple, their recess was in blue, and their lunch was in that green color. And the RTI math was gray. In this case, I don't know what happened to the formatting, but it should be gray. So as you can see, if you look at the 4th grade in the yellow, from 7:40 to 8:40, that was RTI for ELAR. And so what the math teacher, even though she just taught math, she still pulled groups for reading because we needed more. The more groups we could pull, the better. And so the more students we could get to. So if you look at the next set of schedules for 5th grade, in this case, our 5th grade science teacher did all of the ELAR RTI groups, but her time began at 8:40 when 4th grade ended their RTI ELAR. So RTI, they never overlapped. So if it was 4th grade's turn, only 4th grade had RTI at that time. If it was 5th grade, only 5th grade had RTI at that time. And then we also did have, and if you see like this 5th grade math, she has our math RTI twice, and they do overlap, but I just ensured like my dyslexia students, if they were going to be pulled, or my resource students, they were actually with the 5th grade science teacher during the first RTI ELAR block. So you do have to know your students, and you have to intentionally place them in the classes so that they'll be able to be serviced. And so this is what I did with all of the grade levels. And actually now that I'm at the district level, this is how our elementary master schedule runs as well. Their schedule was built around RTI time, and it was a transition as well when we transitioned to the rest of the campuses. The entire district joined us because, like I previously stated, we didn't have a set amount of instructional minutes. And not every campus was doing RTI with fidelity and the amount of time that it needed to have. So we have done some shifting as well now at the district level. And like I said, every elementary does follow this master schedule. So after I created the master schedule, the campus master schedule, I then went and created individual schedules for each and every single teacher, because I didn't want to leave anything to chance or that they didn't understand, or I just needed it in black and white. And so I had I delivered a copy to them, and then I had my secretary go staple one outside of the door so that I could walk by and see, okay, are they on schedule? And it was also good because later on I'll talk about some of the additional staff we hired. And so it was good to have those individual schedules. So another thing I want to tell you is that this master schedule does take time to create. So when I work on creating this master schedule based on RTI, it does take me about 2 days to create the whole schedule. And the reason why it also takes long is because like we have different pairings. Like for example, in for that year I only had 3 teachers. So one fifth grade teacher did all of math, one fifth grade teacher did all of reading, and then the other fifth grade teacher did science and then the reading RTI. So it's just configuring out those configurations. So after I created the campus master schedule, I set a new set of priority goals to implement MTSS RTI. So the next set of priority goals was to actually hold MTSS RTI meetings. And then the second one was to train teachers and tutors on the intervention programs. So I created a schedule for meetings and I emailed it to the teachers 2 weeks before we actually began the meetings. I created a document for grouping so that the teachers could have something to take back. We didn't have branching minds in our district until last year. So my first year as a principal, I did have to create a document for groupings. I also ensured that my data clerk printed out all of the students' report cards, their current attendance, and their discipline report, as well as class rosters, because I wanted to ensure that we were talking about every single student on our campus. And I do recommend when you hold these meetings for branching minds, it's just easier if you have the report cards already printed out, if you have their current attendance, and if you have their discipline report and their class rosters, so the teachers aren't wasting time when you're holding meetings going back and forth between tabs. It's right there in front of them if they need to make a note. It's real easy for them to do that, and I know that they really did appreciate that. And when you're implementing, MTSS RTI meetings the correct way, it can be very overwhelming for the teachers. And so while it may be more work on your data clerks or your secretaries, it's well worth the time because you want to spend your focus to be on talking about the students and creating plans for them versus them filling out, paperwork that's not needed or having to print things when we can already do it. So when it came to training teachers and tutors, the first step was we trained our instructional coach. Our instructional coach then trained the teachers during PLC concurrently as we held our first round of MTSS RTI meetings. And then the instructional coach also trained tutors as they were hired. So in our district, we do have additional 211 funds that we use to hire part-time retired certified teachers to come in and pull small groups. So the tutors, as I would hire them, they would come and pull the students. And so what I did was when I created my RTI schedule, I had that in mind. And so fourth grade went from 7:40 to 8:40 because we had it for an hour. Then fifth grade went from 8:40 to 9:40. Second grade went from 9:40 to 10:40. And then third grade went from 10:40 to 11:40. So that was 4 hours so I could get the tutors in because they can't work more than 4 hours a day. So I prioritize, and that's why you see some math that's in the morning, because in that previous slide I showed you some math RTI because I also had tutors in at that time. And so I needed to maximize everyone that I had available to me. So I had a plan on holding RTI meetings. However, once I began the RTI to hold the RTI meetings, it was like peeling an onion. I discovered that only 56 students out of 505 students that were enrolled in my campus were tiered. When I started with fifth grade and worked my way down, and I called in the first teacher, and she only had 2 students tiered when our data from STAR did not show that. We would have actually been an F campus had we been rated on STAR that year. And so that was very eye-opening, and telling that we hadn't been doing RTI. Teachers had never created goals based on their student needs. Students were not being tiered by multiple data points, so they weren't looking at report cards, they weren't discussing discipline, they weren't discussing the screeners that we were, at that time, we were doing M-Class, they weren't discussing those screeners. They were just deciding basically what they thought who should be tier 1 and who should be tier 2 and tier 3. Meetings were run by the dyslexia teacher. There was no admin in the meetings. There wasn't even a team. So what did we do? After those meetings, we ensured that each student was reviewed and created a data room for tracking. So that's why those class rosters are really important, because we went through each and every single student. And even if they were tier 1, we still discussed them, because we need to ensure that that no one falls through the cracks. An MTSS RTI team was formed. And then teachers learned how to group students as a grade level. Now these bottom three, or these two things, are actually all three Post-its on the bottom. This was a work in progress. There was a lot of guidance that was given by myself to the teachers, because these aren't things that they're going to learn how to do one time. Like this, you're going to have to continuously provide them that guidance. So this is an example of math RTI data. And so as you can see, we would color code our data. And at first our teachers they did not like to color code. And my second year as a principal, that's all they wanted to do was color code. So we became very data driven. So this is the template that I created to house all the information, but you wouldn't need to create this because Branching Minds already has fields where you can enter this data. But these were some of the data points we looked at. We looked at Imagine Math for the math intervention, like the diagnostic, where were they, where did they come out at? And so we looked at district assessments. At this point, this was our first data set of points we had. And as you can see, the data was not where we wanted it to be, and we knew that. Then you can see their grades, and then how many absences, and we tiered them on their absences as well. And then any clarifying data. Do we need to follow up on attendance? You can see that this student, he was a special ed resource, so we need to follow up on, you can see in tier 2 on that clarifying data at the very last row, follow up on, easily distracted. So we created these notes, and this was this is how we tracked our MTSS RTI data the first year. One of the other things that we did implement was we also created groupings. And when we created intervention groupings, like for example, this is for reading. And this is our 3rd grade teacher, Miss Burkett. Miss Burkett had the same RTI block as her partner pair teacher, which is Miss Perry. So in this case, you can see I specifically wrote RTI block 1040 to 1140, tier 2 and 3, Miss Perry, because Miss Perry was going to service these students. So if you see on Monday from 1040 to 1110, and these are not real names, this is just for an example. Michael and Madison were in Miss Perry's class, but Emerson and Azariah were on the same level kit, and they were in Miss Burkett's classroom. So on Mondays from 1040 to 1140, Emerson and Azariah would leave Miss Burkett's class and go to Miss Perry's class so that they could do intervention. This was also a culture shift on our campus because they were not used to doing that. They only saw their own students. And so when I did this, I did have to have all the teachers in we did this our first year during PLC. And I would have to have all the teachers' input because there was lots of moving pieces. And then you can see the next slide, like this is Miss Burkett's actual blocks. And I even had to be as specific as on Monday, who do you see? Tuesday, who do you see? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because we hadn't been doing it correctly. And so I needed to ensure that we were doing it correctly. And so the same thing would happen, like if we had tutors, a tutor had the same template of schedule as well with the students listed. And so we would redo groupings, beginning of the year data and middle of the year data. By the time it came to the end of the year data and the screening process, by the time we got that data, we were doing enrichment during our RTI time block. So we did not redo it then, and this was year 1. So how did we do at the end of year 1? Well, on our comprehensive campus, we were a B, so we went from a C to a B, and on our academy side, we were rated an overall A rating from TEA based upon our STAR data. And so the teachers did attribute all the interventions that we did. They did attribute the success to that. One teacher even told me, well, after all the interventions we've done, we better be a B. So like I said, again, it was changing that culture of, we're going to look at data, we're going to use that data to, look at the students' needs and provide that intervention along with quality tier 1 instruction. So at the end of year 1, that's me. I had a sigh of relief because, all of the hard work we did, all of the time we invested into this implementation, into the master schedule, we saw gains, we saw success. And so going into year 2, I knew that there was still work that needed to be done. And so we came up with priority goals. And so one of them was to actually progress monitor and enter that data into branching minds. Another one, and don't get me wrong, the teachers were progress monitoring, but the documentation is what was lacking. So we needed a process as to how we were going to do that. Implementation into implementing branching minds was also a big one. I knew after I had received the first training from Branching Minds that this was going to be something that I was going to need to guide the teachers with, and it wasn't something that I expected them to do on their own because we were all learning and growing together, and I wanted it to be successful. I found out as a principal that anytime you give teachers time to do something, the implementation of it, there's just a big difference with it when you don't give them time. And then we did add additional intervention programs by tier. So if you remember, in year 1, I just gave them one intervention, and if they were tier 2 or tier 3, they did it. And the reason why I did that was because we weren't even doing RTI correctly the year before. And so I just needed them to understand what RTI instruction looked like, MTSS RTI instruction looked like, before I would give them more, because like I said, it always goes back to wanting it to be successful. Sometimes you got to go slow to go fast. So what did we do to enhance our RTI program? So we added tier 3 programs in math and in reading, and we differentiated the programs between K2 and 3-5. So we did train the teachers and the tutors on the new programs and then how to progress monitor. Now in Branching Minds, there is a place where you do enter the how they're progressing, right? Like their goals, and it'll give you like to-dos, right? Once you create the plan, you're going to be receiving to-dos, and one of the to-dos is for attendance, right? Did they get intervention at that time and at that date? And then the other to-do is putting in that progress monitor data. So I knew as a principal, by the temperature check and all the work we had done the year before, that my teachers at the beginning of the year were not ready to enter all of those progress monitoring data into Branching Minds on their own every 2 weeks. And I also knew that I didn't even want to tell them about the to-dos because I knew that it was just going to be something else. They were already going to be overwhelmed by just creating a plan. So we focused, after we received the data for beginning of the year screener in year 2, we focused on creating goals and we focused on creating plans. But I gave them a paper document where they actually recorded the progress monitoring and where they recorded the students' attendance. And the reason why I did this also is because we have tutors, and because they're part-time and they see our students in groups during the MTSS RTI time, they needed somewhere to document so that when they gave the information to the teachers could input that information into Branching Minds. So like I said, after beginning of the year, we did that initial RTI, those initial RTI meetings. All they focused on was creating the plan and creating the goals and creating the intervention plan. I also hired subs for an entire grade level to come and do MTSS RTI meetings together. So I would always start with 5th grade. And so on Monday, the schedule looked like on Monday, I had actually I had 5, a mixture of 5 5th grade teachers that were on the team. And so I called in for 5 subs and they covered their class and the teachers came in and we held the meetings. And the reason why I did that is, yes, it is costing you money as a principal to hire those subs, but if you want something done right, you need to invest in it. And so to me, that was a good investment. I also knew the learning curve that my teachers were going to experience when creating those plans like that. And so I knew that they needed a whole day. And so the good thing about it is that within those grade levels, we have a grade level chair. And so that grade level chair also became the teacher leader when it came to MTSS RTI. And so they were the ones who would make sure, and this was towards the end of the year, they would make sure that before the teachers came to me, before we had these grade level MTSS RTI meetings, that all their to-dos were checked. And so we were just going to put in the actual progress monitoring data and then see did they make progress or not, and then create plans. They also help the teachers create the plans as well, or if I had to step out, then they would actually help them out until I could come back. And so it was really nice to see that they became those teacher leaders, and it wasn't something that I asked them to do, but like I said, they were just a great group of teachers, and they just stepped up to the plate. And so that was really, really nice. And one of the other things I want to mention is that I sat at every single MTSS RTI meeting. And so these meetings would usually take up, by the time I finish the entire campus, it would probably be about 2 weeks. But if I wanted, like I said, if you want something to be successful, you need to invest the time and the funding to it. And because I wanted to see our students succeed, I sat in every single every single meeting. However, like I mentioned earlier, if I had to step out, I mean, sometimes things happen as a campus principal or a previous administrator, that happens. Every student also had an intervention or enrichment plan. So I hired enough tutors so that every single student on campus could get seen every single day in small group, 5 days a week. All students receive small group instruction, like I said, every day, no matter the tier. We also implemented, Michelle actually also helped us implement school-wide graphic organizers for accommodations to create streamlining from teacher to teacher and from grade to grade. So they weren't using a separate graphic organizer when they went to Ms. Esquivel for resource, or if a student was 504, they got a different graphic organizer from the dyslexia teacher. So it was just a lot of streamlining. one thing we also did was we added, like I said, more tier 3 programs. Sorry, my computer's gonna go. Okay, so after we did all of those things, in the month we implemented all of those things. Our school actually made the front page of our newspaper this past September, and so we were very surprised, we were excited, and so the teachers were just surprised as well, and they couldn't believe it. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of what they wrote in the newspaper. So they wrote, Benavides students saw massive gains in performance on the state of Texas assessments of academic readiness, including an increase of 35 percentage points in 5th grade math, where 79% of the test takers passed, compared with 44% the previous year. So that's a huge gain, that 35% gain. Most area school districts improved their math scores. Some fell flat on the reading exams, however, which had a heavy emphasis on writing this year. But 3rd graders at Benavides managed an 86% passing rate in reading, up 22 points from the prior year. 5th graders increased their passing rate 21 points to 71%. And then you'll see the last section at the bottom. Benavides improved its math scores more than any public elementary school in San Antonio, according to a report from the nonprofit City Education Partners, which ranks star performance in each city council district. Only Idea Monterey Park College Prep and a K-12 charter school on the west side and Cole Middle School in Fort Sam Houston ISD had a higher increase, the report showed. In reading, those two schools were among just 6 that had higher test increases than Benavides. And so as you can see, the hard work really did pay off. And so we ended on a very, very good note. And it was also, the teachers were just also glad to see that recognition and that all their hard work did pay off. So what are some lessons learned what are some lessons that I learned as starting this MTSS RTI program from the ground up is always provide teachers time during the day to input the data into branching minds and create intervention plans. I think if I had not taken that time, or if I did not provide them that time, I don't think the success we saw would have been the same. And like I said, I know it's a day that they're away from the students, but if they don't have a good plan, they could be at work every single day working with the students, and you're not going to see the gains you want to see. One of the other things I learned is make the process as easy as possible. Remember, a teacher has a lot of things on their plate. And so if there's something that you can print out or someone else can print out that's not in the classroom, take that extra step. You definitely have to go slow to go fast. And so while year 1, we didn't do MTSS RTI perfectly, we were able to keep that momentum in year 2, and which we definitely saw a vast amount of gains. And always remind your teachers that you're learning and growing together. And so they're gonna make mistakes. The plan may not be perfect at first, or they may have to redo a plan, but be there with them doing it in the work. I will tell you that it's a culture shift. And so when I walked in day 1, there was nothing in place, but we were able to change that culture as a campus. And because of that, I do attribute a lot of the gains to that. The most important thing is build your master schedule around MTSS RTI. If you want this to be a priority, then you need to make it a priority as well. And so year 1, that meant that my assistant principal was in lunch duty for 3 hours a day, but that's what we needed at that time because we needed to ensure 1, student safety, and 2, that our students were receiving the services that they needed to receive. And the last one is don't give up. Even if it seems like the teachers are having a hard time with it, I can't stress enough to provide them the support they need, give them the time, and let them know that we're going to continue doing this. It may be hard, but it's what's in the best interest of our students. So thank you. If you have any questions, this is my, if you have any additional questions after we start the Q&A here, you think of something later after the session has ended, this is my email, vanessa.dominguez@southsendisd.net, and I am willing to share any documents I have with you, or you have any questions, or you need to jump on a phone call, I'm more than willing to help.
All right. Thank you, Vanessa. That was awesome. Just hearing the success story, laying it out, seeing how you started slow with your teachers or your staff, giving them a slow ramp up, that definitely to me played a part in their buy-in and the ultimate success. So any questions from anyone out there based on what she said, like how you can implement it at your campus or just anything that stuck out to you? Do we have any questions from anyone while we still have them? They've been quiet in the chat. So it doesn't seem like we have any questions right now, but y'all still have some time if you want to. That one. What's your progress monitoring looks like for math? His school is using iReady for the first time and they aren't happy with the iReady progress monitoring tools. So curious as to what y'all use.
So we used, when we progress monitored with iReady, we actually used the lessons. So the teacher, because there's like the online portion of it, right? But we actually use the iReady bank to lessons, and that's what the teachers would do. And so if they were tier 2, the goal was for them to have 40% or higher when they did those lessons. And if they were tier 2, then the goal for them that we would put in branching minds was 60% or higher, right? And so when you kind of look at back then, before they changed the passing rates for STAR, it was kind of like, if you were at 60%, you were gonna pass the assessment at approaches. So we just came up with the goal for our teachers, because that is a thing that teachers are going to have a hard time with. And I forgot to mention this, is they're not gonna know how to create what should a student's goal be? And then for K2 and reading, in math, we used, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot the name of it. M-Class. So M-Class has an intervention, a math intervention. And so when you give them the diagnostic, right, like if that's your screener that you use M-Class, then they have lessons based on the different inventories. And so we created those students' goal based upon what they would need to have in those inventories in the middle of the year in order to be successful. And then for K through 2, if they were non-readers, we used M-Class interventions. And if they were readers, then we used LLI. So it just it just depended on the level of where the student was at as to what intervention program we used. And so sometimes we had to take, like, for even like in 3 through 5, if we knew that the student was struggling on one topic or one skill, then we would go and take it from the K through 2 intervention. I will tell you that, and I forgot to mention this, every single grade level had their own RTI room with the interventions already in there. And so like we did LLI, which required the students to have a folder with other materials. So at the beginning of the year, the paraprofessionals would create all the folders. I would purchase the folders. So the teachers were literally just going shopping to get the materials they wanted and that they needed. And so they also knew that if they needed something else that was like the lower grades had, that they would just go and shop in that lower grade room. So I believe we had a K1 RTI room, a 2-3 RTI room with materials, and we had a 4-5 room. And that's also where the tutors would work out of. And yes, so not the quizzes, but like within the lesson, there are questions that the students answer independently. And I would tell the teachers, like, we're not giving them 10 questions to answer. Like, we just need like 3 or 4 questions, and that'll tell us whether they know the skill and we're ready to scaffold to the next thing. So we have a good question. When in the master schedule are special education services provided? So for reading, if it was resource, we really try to pull them if time allotted during that RTI time, that MTSS RTI time. So that way they could get a double dose. They could actually get the tier 1 instruction, and then they would get the resource, which is scaffolded a little bit down for them. So but just dependent, but it didn't always work like that. Also, we would try to schedule, like if there was inclusion, we would try to schedule our special ed teacher to go into inclusion during that time, because then while she's pulling a small group with those students, she could also work with other students who we think may eventually be, test and qualify for special education. No, and we also we're a bilingual campus. So for bilingual, we did use hopscotch, and that is kind of like the best reading curriculum that I found, because there isn't very much intervention programs that are truly Spanish, that aren't a translation. And so when you're working on reading in Spanish, you learn how to read differently in Spanish than you do in English, and not all the rules apply. And so I found that was the best intervention for bilingual. Now, if for 3 through 5, for reading, we did all use LLI unless they couldn't, then they couldn't read, like they were non-readers, then we would use M-Class. But that was very rare that we had a student who was not reading. And the same interventions for 3 through 5. For math, it was different, and for reading, for math, it was different, K through 2 and 3 through 5. And Ms. Brewer, yes, our district has shifted to the science of reading. That is actually one of our big things that we are working on right now. We're rolling it out. So I'm proud to say that all of our teachers have sound walls up in their classrooms in grades K through 3. So that was a big milestone that we hit. And then we've also are working with a outside company, consultants, and they're coming in and actually doing PD with the teachers. And so one of the things I recommend is, it's not that they don't want to do the science of reading, it's that it's hard. It's not how we learned to teach reading when we were in college, and it's not what we have done historically. But I will tell you what we are using for reading intervention now that's aligned to the science of reading. So for tier 3, K through 5, we are using, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot. Hold on, sorry. I'm sorry, we're using UFly. Sorry, I completely blanked out. So UFly, and it's only $60 a manual, and all the resources are free online. And what I mean by that is it doesn't come with decodables. It's a manual that's about this big. And so all of our K through 5 teachers have a UFly book in hand. And that's what we use for tier 3. That's also what our reading intervention use. There's nothing, that's the only thing that I found that is actually the science of reading that is scripted and easy to do. And then for comprehension, if a student is struggling with comprehension based on their goal, whatever their goal is, we use M-Class. They have a resource library. So not the Boost online, but M-Class Boost resource library that has actual teacher lessons for comprehension, and they're not bad at all. Like, they actually do address the standards. And so that's what I like, because before M-Class had M-Class Boost Resource Center, the old Resource Center was not good for reading comprehension interventions. For math, we work with Eureka, or we use Eureka in our district, and so they have a program that we purchased on this, like, in addition to, and so they are, our math coordinator for elementary has actually aligned those lessons to the goals that are in branching minds. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with actually going in and inputting the goals, but they are now, she created a document so that when the teachers are creating the goals and the plans, if the student needs help with math fluency, then those lessons are already laid out, and it's by grade level, so the teacher knows what to use. You're welcome. If I could go back, what would I do differently? I think sometimes I thought I was being very, very clear with what I wanted the teachers to do. And because they were just so good and compliant, they'd be like, okay, we're gonna go out there and do it. And then, you know, they'd be struggling and they wouldn't tell me. And so they kind of went through a struggle that they didn't necessarily have to go through. So I wish I would have been, like I said, more clear in my communications, just to save them unnecessary grief. What is the part of Eureka that you purchased? Okay, let me get that for you. It's equipped, but I'm actually going to pull up the document that my coordinator made so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And I'll share my screen so you could see. So see, this is grade 1, and so if this is the goal, this is the goal that the students will have that's already in Eureka equipped, then she went and put which module it is and what lessons they would be doing. And so she did it for all of the goals that are in branching minds. All right, well, does anyone have any other questions? Yes, of course. Just shoot me an email and I will share it with you.
Can we put your email in the chat?
Oh, sure.
Y'all, please give it up for our two hosts today. I think they did an excellent job. Vanessa and Michelle with practical advice, something that is useful. Sometimes over our head, but this was something I think that is tangible, it's digestible, and we can start now, essentially. So thank you for your time. And like I said, we are going to send her a PDF of her slides after the presentation. So you will have that. She dropped her email in the chat if you want to follow up to ask some of those questions that may be specific to you. But ladies, thank you so much. This was so helpful. Thank you for all of you who came. We really appreciate it. And I hope you learned something and you put it to use.
Bye, y'all have a great day.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.